Okay. Declaro abierto el debate.
I call to order the high-level debate on international migration and development, convened in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 73/241, as established in that resolution. This debate is in lieu of the 29 high-level dialogue and will serve as a basis for the high-level political forum on sustainable development, which will review the goals and targets relevant to migration of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, taking into consideration the outcomes of other processes related to international migration and development. I would like to extend to all of you a warm welcome. I will now make a brief opening statement. I open by welcoming Ambassador Santiago Chavez, Vice Minister for Human Mobility of the Republic of Ecuador and President of the Global Forum for Migration and Development. Distinguished ministers, permanent representatives, delegates, civil society representatives, I am very pleased to see you all here today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Almost 3 months have passed since we endorsed the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration in the General Assembly. This was the first framework for global cooperation which addresses all dimensions of international migration. This makes it both necessary and timely for us to hold this high-level debate today. The debate addresses two of the most important themes on our multilateral agenda. They are migration and sustainable development, both deeply interconnected and interdependent. In addition, soon we will see the holding of two important events to review the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These are, on the one hand, the high-level political forum under the auspices of ECOSOC in July next, and the summit of the political forum under the auspices of the General Assembly during the high-level week of the 74th session. This summit will be fundamental for migrants because it seeks to empower everyone and reduce inequalities. Excellencies, today I would like to address three themes that I believe are key to our high-level discussion today. Firstly, we will not be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals if we do not comprehensively include migrants. The 2030 Agenda is people-centred. Target 10.7 refers specifically to the need to facilitate safe, regular and responsible migration and calls for the implementation of planned and well-managed migratory policies. To do this, we must include migrants in policies and activities aimed at expanding access to quality education, to health, to housing and basic services, to water and sanitation, but also to the building of peaceful and inclusive societies. In the last few years, we have borne witness to large movements of migrants which have claimed thousands of lives. Achieving sustainable development in all countries and regions, as set as an objective of the 2030 Agenda, will allow us to mitigate the adverse drivers of migration. In other words, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals will be the best preventative tool for migration, and particularly for disorderly migration. Let us bear in mind that no one decides to leave behind their family, their land, their belongings without a powerful reason for doing so. In the same vein, migrants frequently leave their countries of origin, cross one or several borders and settle in a country regardless of which that is. This makes it all the more necessary to guarantee the rights of migrants. Therefore, the 23 objectives of the Global Compact on Migration were structured in accordance with the 2030 Agenda, addressing the risks and challenges confronting persons and communities in countries of origin, transit, and destination. Excellencies, there are fundamental aspects that must be addressed in this dialogue. These include the trafficking and smuggling of persons and the nexus between migration and labour policies. This latter topic is a priority for my presidency. Access to decent work is one of the keys to the attainment of the 2030 Agenda. In fact, on the 10th of April next, I have convened a meeting to commemorate the centenary of the International Labour Organization. This meeting will allow us to address the transformations in the labour market and the future of work. We must not overlook migrants in this discussion and analysis. We must also specifically address the situation and needs of migrant women, who represent more than half of the migrant population across the world. They face more restrictive labour policies than men, and they are more vulnerable to violence and exploitation. Women and girls represent 71% of all of the victims of trafficking in persons. Migrant women face greater barriers to access health services. And I must say that during each and every one of my official visits, now as President of the General Assembly and previously as Foreign Minister and Human Mobility of Ecuador, I noted that much remains to be done to include migrants. But I've also noted the enormous contribution of migration to development, which leads me on to my second point this morning. That is, that evidence shows that the benefits of migration outweigh the challenges. As I said at the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration in Marrakesh, we're talking about a mother from Mali who crosses the desert to reach Niger, a university student from India studying in Canada, or a retired US citizen who decides to live in Vilcabamba or in Cuenca in Ecuador. Every one of those, absolutely every one, they are all seeking more and better opportunities, opening the doors to new worlds, enriching cultural diversity and contributing to development, both in their host communities as well as the communities from which they left. The majority of remittances are sent to developing countries, and their contribution to economies is 3 times greater than official development assistance. In 2017, we saw the sending of 600 billion in remittances, of which 450 billion were sent to developing countries. Thus, migrants contribute to progressing towards the specific goals of the 2030 Agenda, such as the reduction of poverty, the eradication of hunger, and the promotion of health. But more still, 85% of the earnings of migrant workers remain in countries of destination. And in this way, migrants also contribute to the economic growth of countries of destination and to job creation as well as the distribution of services. In a globalized and interdependent world, human mobility must be harnessed as an opportunity, as a driver of development, for migrants and their families, as well as for countries of origin, transit, and destination. My third and last point for this morning is that we must achieve greater communication on migration. In order to do this, we must promote a well-informed debate on migration from a comprehensive, inclusive, and balanced perspective. We need to work to overcome the prejudices that unfortunately have always been associated with migration. And this must be a shared effort between governments, the media, civil society organizations, parliaments, local governments, efforts to eradicate xenophobia, prejudice, and negative and discriminatory expressions relating to migrants. May there be no doubt, the Global Compact on Migration does not affect the sovereignty of any state. On the contrary, it bolsters it. No state, however powerful it may be, will be able to resolve alone the challenges posed by migration. The Compact fosters cooperation between states as the best tool to address international migration. Now our commitment is to implement the Global Compact on Migration, and in order to do this, I have appointed the permanent representatives of Bangladesh and Spain as co-facilitators of the process to determine the modalities of the International Migration Review Forum, which will be monitoring the implementation of the Compact. The active and constructive participation of states in this process is essential so that we can have an agile and effective mechanism for the follow-up of and lessons learned from the implementation of the Compact. This should be a mechanism that facilitates and promotes the exchange of good practices and, in reality, is already being implemented in many countries of the world. During my official visits to France, Canada, Oman, inter alia, I've been able to see some of these good practices and successful examples. This shows us that we are not starting from zero with the implementation of this compact, but we also need to have better data, better information, based on evidence relating to the realities of migration. Let us not forget that behind the figures and statistics, percentages, there are human beings, families, names. Excellencies, in closing, I note that we have very little information on the benefits and progress made in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in the area of migrants. We know that many efforts have been made to build policies, tools and partnerships, but we also know that gaps remain. I'm sure that this dialogue will help us to identify how we can boost the contribution of migrants to development and to make more headway in including migrants in the benefits of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Migration is a part of the history of mankind. This phenomenon has always existed. There is no country nor people in the world that has not been transformed by it. Now we have the historic opportunity to work together to avoid risky or forced migration. We can manage to ensure that migration is an option and not a requirement for survival. I am looking forward to seeing the results of this debate, and I'm sure that it will enrich the dialogue, practices and policies in migration, and in this way will contribute to the review forum process. Thank you very much.
Pasamos ahora a los...
We will now move on to the topics that we'll be discussing today. As indicated in the programme, this high-level debate consists of an opening segment, 2 separate panel discussions and a closing segment, all of which will take place in this chamber. I would like to remind the participants that there will be no pre-established list of speakers. Participants are therefore encouraged to use the opportunity during the panel discussions to pose questions and respond in an interactive manner to the comments and presentations made by the panelists and other experts. Panel Discussion 1, entitled Overview on Progress in Achieving Migration-Related Goals, will be moderated by Ms. Marion Barthelemy, Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and this will take place immediately following this opening segment. Panel Discussion 2, entitled Addressing Capacity Building Gaps, Mobilizing Resources and Developing Processes and Policies and Building Partnerships, will be moderated by His Excellency Agustín Santos Maraver, Permanent Representative of Spain to the United Nations, and this panel discussion will take place from 3 to 5:45 p.m. The closing segment will begin immediately thereafter at 5:45 p.m. I would now like to invite the moderator and panelists of Panel Discussion 1 to take their seats at the podium. The opening segment is now concluded. Thank you once again for being here.